In the 1990s, the small Welsh community of Aeron had a population of less than 2,000. Occupying the left bank of the River Aeron, the village takes its name from its relation to the waterway, being on one of the Aeron's many magical wooded valley bends. Delightfully rural, a part of the country that is associated with all manner of outdoor pursuits, from fishing to farming, it was in this countryside setting that a young man called Mike resided. In 1991, he lived in a small trailer caravan outside his parents' home, and it was here that he would witness something not merely strange and terrible, but also quite possibly otherworldly as well. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. Late one night in the summer of 1991, Mike, as was his habit, was sitting in his caravan listening to the radio, when, all of a sudden, the sound went static. Clicking followed, and then odd beeps of descending pitch that fell all the way to subsonic, and then rose back up to the higher pitch. After that, the clicks returned, the radio signal of only a moment before thoroughly disrupted. As Mike listened to all of this, it is said that a creeping feeling of nervousness came over him, a sensation that was magnified by the sound of his dog under the porch of the nearby house starting to bark. It was then that Mike heard a low rumbling noise from outside of his caravan, a sound which got louder and louder until, unable to ignore it, he went out to investigate. Sensationally, there was a craft outside. Despite initially thinking it to be an aeroplane, it soon became clear to Mike that whatever he was looking at was not normal. Dark, silhouetted against the night sky, slowly travelling over one of the valley's hills, it appeared to be flying so low that Mike feared it was about to crash. He could see no fuselage, only what looked to be one wing pointing up and another pointing down towards the ground. It was huge, and as slow as it was, seemed to occupy the sky impossibly. Travelling above and over the young man, it moved with what has been described as a thunderous tearing of the air. Mike was certain it was about to fall from the sky. And yet it didn't. It did, however, trigger, so it seemed, a headache in Mike as it passed over him. Not only that, in the grip of what is claimed to have been an uncomfortable static in the air, the young man fell to the ground, dizzy and unable to control his own motions. Recalling the experience some 3 decades later, Mike explained that he had a feeling like his head had been momentarily stuck to the ground, like he had been unconscious. The next he could remember, he was crawling back across the field to his caravan, struggling to stand and having difficulty opening the door so as to retreat inside. As the object left, continuing on its way, flying southeast, inland and away from the coast, Mike saw it illuminate. A red light on either side, and then, incredibly, yellow, purple, green and orange lights also. The craft looked to be some manner of arc or aircraft perpendicular to the ground. Terrified, Mike knew that what he had just witnessed, in combination with the radio interference, his dog's reaction, and above all his body's collapse, had not been an ordinary aircraft. He had seen something incredible, something otherworldly. In the years afterwards, Mike claims to have experienced further strangeness, including a near-death experience involving a vision of being lifted up into the clouds and communicating with a being inside an invisible plane, and even recurring vivid dreams of being in a setting akin to an operating theatre, where he is repeatedly tortured by having long metal probes inserted behind his eyeballs. In his mind, these experiences are undeniably linked to what he witnessed that summer night in 1991 in Aeron. Whatever one might think of this story, Mike is by no means the only person to have alleged the incredible in the Aeron River Valley. According to online archives, on the 23rd of April 2016, a visitor to Aeron, the picturesque seaside town which sits at the mouth of the river, observed a dark disc-shaped object hovering at high altitude over the sea just beyond the town. The UFO is said to have had a light shining beneath it. Then, earlier in the autumn of 1975, another witness, David Harrison, a bus driver who had just finished work for the day, saw only a stone's throw from Cloud Aeron a cigar-shaped craft over the river valley, heading in the direction of Aeron. Arguably similar to the unidentified object seen by Mike 16 years later, it was, so Harrison testified, moving slowly and had a row of circular lights along its upper half, which pulsated blue and yellow. The bus driver is said to have continued watching the craft for around 10 minutes, after which it suddenly shot up at an angle and to the right before disappearing from view. And so the region surrounding the River Aeron can be said to have a long legacy of otherworldly activity. Someone who knows this better than most is Helena Worth, a local woman who, through her lifelong interest in stargazing, can be said to have had more than her fair share of strange experiences. Having lived in the area her whole life, her stories date back to childhood. Recently, after a series of yet more inexplicable things happening in the local area, she made the decision to speak out about her experiences within the Aeron Valley. Happily, I was able to arrange to meet with her and hear some of them firsthand.
I've been interested in the sky for very many years. I was born and bred in a very rural location, so our night skies were always very, very dark, no light pollution. And back in those days, when I was young, there was no mobile phones. So a friend of mine called Rebecca, she used to walk up to my house in the evening, and we used to lie down on the road at the front of my house, and it was a very quiet road, but we used to lie on our backs looking up at the sky for hours and hours. So we were really interested in all the constellations and looking at the stars and the moon, and often we'd see shooting stars, and of course we'd see satellites going by, and satellites just have a straight line trajectory. They don't change their course, and we knew that. But from time to time we would see something unusual, and we got to know what is unusual and what is normal because we spent so many hours doing it.
Given how many hours Helena and her friends spent staring up at the night sky, she soon came to recognize what was usual and what wasn't. Directional changes were, for example, one of the characteristics that a young Helena identified as peculiar.
We thought it was a satellite, and then it would change its course. It would move in the opposite direction, for example, and we saw that from time to time.
Her interest in the night sky having expanded, Helena continued to stargaze into adulthood, until one day she saw something utterly unexpected.
It was the 11th of December 2018, and it was very cold and it was a very dark morning. I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning to let the puppies out, and I opened the back door. Bearing in mind the weather was very cold but dry, and it was pitch black, being 6 o'clock in the morning in December. So I opened the back door, and I have a view of the Aeron Valley. So we live at the bottom of the Aeron Valley, so we can see the other side of the Aeron Valley, and there are houses dotted all along. And what caught my view as soon as I opened the back door was a ball of what I thought a massive ball of fire. And even though it was pitch black, I knew the location of it. I thought, gosh, that's over by the houses over there. And my initial reaction was, oh my goodness, there's a house on fire across the valley. And the ball of fire was the size of a house. And I stood there contemplating, what am I going to do? Do I call the fire brigade and say there's a house on fire? Or shall I drive over there and see which house it is and then call the fire brigade? And as I was deciding what to do, this ball of fire started to move. And I knew straight away that isn't a house on fire. It was spherical, perfectly round, the size of a house. It was bright white to yellow, and it started moving above, I believe above the houses and above the trees, because I couldn't see the houses, of course. I could only see this flame. It started moving to the west in a straight line, quite slowly, I would say from here maybe between 20 to 30 miles an hour, and then it stopped and hovered over what I believe would have been a house over there. It hovered and it stayed there, and it wasn't just a ball of fire, it was undulating. It was, the perimeter of it was doing this. It wasn't just static, it was as if it was alive somehow. It was undulating like this. And it hovered over the house for, I would say, a minute. And then it started going back towards the east, and it continued to fly over houses, over trees, sometimes behind trees. And as it was flying, this, what I can only describe as molten lava, was dripping from underneath it. Drip, 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 drip. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it continued to drip and fly over trees, and I could see it going along the Aeron Valley. And just before it went out of sight, the top half of the sphere turned a bright red colour. Really bright red light. And then it went out of view. I was absolutely stunned, and I could not take my eyes off it. I was stood in awe watching it. I didn't even think to take a phone out of my pocket. I didn't have a phone in my pocket, but I didn't even think to go and grab my phone. All I wanted to do was watch this thing. I wanted to take it all in, because I knew it was something so highly unusual.
Despite attempting to rationalize what she witnessed, including researching ball lightning and other natural phenomena, Helena was left profoundly changed by her sighting. No longer merely interested in the stars in the sky, she soon after turned her attention to other celestial objects as well, most especially those of an unusual and unidentifiable nature. Over 4 years later, she is now convinced that what she saw that December morning was extraterrestrial in some way.
After seeing that, it confirmed 100% my belief in extraterrestrials. I am sure it was an extraterrestrial craft of some sort. Or these orbs, like a massive orb it was, these orbs could be living beings in themselves.
Such a sensational conclusion is not one that Helena has come to lightly. During our interview, she demonstrated extensive knowledge of other UFO sightings across the world, information which she has taken it upon herself to cultivate in the years since her 2018 sighting. And yet, her belief that these orb-like objects may very well be alive is not something that she has decided through continuing research alone. For, after witnessing the large, molten, dripping fire orb, she claims to have had other encounters with other seemingly living orbs, even as recently as just a few weeks before our meeting.
One evening, just a few weeks ago, I went out to the front, opened the door, and stood up and started looking, and immediately saw a ping-pong-sized orb, very, very bright, light blue light. Very bright, and it was up just a few meters ahead of me, but up high as the oak tree that's at the front. And it was there, hovering, and obviously I was watching it, and then it started floating down a little bit like a feather, like this, very slowly, just right in front of me, from the height of the tree, all the way down, very slowly, bright orb. And before it hit the wall, which is just the opposite side of the road, it just blinked out into nothing.
Given that Helena's home overlooks a deer park, a large expanse of wilderness and ancient woodland in which there are no houses or other man-made light sources, this was undoubtedly strange. By this point well practiced in examining her experiences and other claims of unidentified flying objects, she also confirmed that there were no lightning storms or other weather phenomena which might offer an explanation as to the floating blue light orb. Discussing her other experiences in more detail, she also revealed to me that she had captured a similar orb on her home security system.
This is an image from my doorbell cam, and I've just taken a screenshot of it. Here's a car with its backlight and front light. Here's my car, and in the forest at the back of the deer park there's an orb there. Now, I didn't physically see this orb with my own eyes, it's just that the doorbell cam happened to take this picture as there was movement in front of the camera. So because the car was here arriving, it took a picture.
And so these were not just imagined sightings, but actual light anomalies that could be captured on camera and indeed seen by others.
Me and my son viewed an orb together, and this was only about 3 or 4 months ago. Again, I went out to the front as I normally do before I go to bed, and he followed me out, looking up at the stars before I go to bed. And I pointed up and I said, "Look at that, Eddie," I said. "There's a really bright satellite going along there. Watch it, it's really, really bright." And it was slightly bigger than the other stars, because usually a satellite would be about the size of the other stars. But it was slightly bigger, same colour, orangey colour, same brightness. I said, look at that satellite, it's really, really bright, watch it, let's watch it together." And we were watching it together, and it was doing its usual straight line trajectory, and then it stopped. And it stopped, and it just stayed there. And me and my son looked at each other, and he knows I'm into, UFO watching, UAP watching, sky watching. And he says, "Mum, it stopped." And I said, "Yeah, Eddie, I think we're looking at a UFO." And literally, I stood out there for an hour watching this thing, waiting for it to move, because I thought, what's it going to do next? Will it zoom off? And I wanted to watch. And I watched for about an hour, and I was so cold by that point, I'd given up and I went indoors. But that was highly unusual, and yeah, my son was a witness to that.
And yet, as awe-inspiring as some of Helena's experiences have been, she has also been left scared. Horrifyingly, she told me about a time that 2 of these light orbs entered her home.
This was about a year ago now, probably in 2022, and in the middle of the night, as I usually do, I get up out of bed to use the bathroom. So I walked past the front door. Now the front door is one of these doors where the top half is glass, but it's like this bathroom glass, so it's got patterns in it. And then the bottom half of the door is just plastic. So as I walked past the door, the porch door, there were 2 blue lights in the porch. And I stood there and looked at them. One of the lights was a light blue colour. The other light next to it was a slightly darker blue, but both of which were bright lights. They weren't circular. It was as if there was something standing there, but this something that was standing there was just a pure blue light. But what was funny to me was, I looked at it, acknowledged it was there, and carried on doing my thing, went to the bathroom, walked back, and as I was walking back to the bedroom, I walked past the door again, and they were still there. I went to bed, I closed my eyes and I went to sleep. My reaction in the morning was, why on earth did I ignore those things? Why did I just go back to bed and go back to sleep? Why didn't I wake up my husband and say, look, there are blue beings in the porch? My reaction to it, I felt, was very highly unusual. I know I saw those things. I walked past it twice and they were there both times. I wasn't sleepwalking. I was very aware of where I was and what I was doing.
Does it concern you that these lights were inside your house?
Yes, I would say yes. I feel very privileged that they were there, but at the same time, after that, I didn't sleep very well for a few nights, for a few weeks really. It did frighten me a little bit after the experience, but the experience itself at that time I wasn't frightened. But after that, from the next day, following day onwards, then I was a little unnerved about it.
And certainly, in the course of our conversation, Helena revealed other unsettling details about her experiences. Electrical anomalies inside her home, further light orbs, and even as a girl an experience which, as she explained it, gave me chills.
When I was very young, and I can only guess I might have been 5 years old, and I've always remembered this, but in the back of my mind tried to forget it because it was quite scary. And one night I woke up in my bedroom, and in my bedroom I had 2 single beds, one this side of the room and one that side of the room, so that if I had girlfriends come over to sleep over, they'd have a bed to sleep in. So I was asleep in this bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and all I remember was sitting up in bed, grabbing my quilt, holding it in front of my face like this, staring at something that was at the end of the bed. And there was something there that absolutely terrified me, and I was screaming, but no sound was coming out of my mouth. And I cannot for the life of me remember what I was screaming at, but what it was, it absolutely terrified me. And after that, I don't know, I must have gone back to sleep, but I'm not sure. And the next morning, when I woke up, I was in that bed. And that frightens me. That actually frightens me, just talking about it.
I got chills when you were saying
Yeah.
it. So again, you told me that because you knew we were going to be talking about this sort of thing. So why again did your mind link that experience to the things that you've seen in the sky?
Well, when I was little, I didn't link that experience to anything really. I just thought of it as a really frightening experience that I wanted to forget. But only really since having my major sighting in 2018 did I start thinking back to that time and remembering what happened. And possibly, I don't know, possibly there's a link between the two. I can't say 100% that what I was looking at was an extraterrestrial, but I tell you what, there's a real possibility, you know, what was I screaming at? And whatever it was, it was so terrifying that I've blanked it out of my brain completely, of my own accord, or whatever it was, did it blank my memory for me in order to save me from terror? I don't know.
Whilst Helena throughout her interview was always clear to express a sense of awe and being honoured for having been given the chance to witness all that she has, such stories undeniably cast an eerie shadow on her experiences. What is more, it is difficult to forget that others in the Aeron Valley, including Mike in 1991, have also been left overwhelmed by their possibly extraterrestrial encounters. Recently, the valley and the wider area have been experiencing somewhat of a panic in terms of a series of shocking animal deaths. Indeed, it was an article published by the Cambrian News, a weekly regional newspaper, which encouraged Helena to speak out about extraterrestrial activity on Earth. It was reported that, according to local farmers and rural property owners, a big cat was on the loose, killing and horrifically mutilating livestock. A series of photographs and testimonies were published. In one case, 2 sheep were shown to have been expertly skinned. According to local farmer Jonathan Davies, no native animal was capable of such precise butchering, and so concerned he contacted the police. Later speaking to the Cambrian News, he revealed that he was told informally that a big cat could have been responsible for the killings. Elusive big cats, including black panthers, have a long legacy right across the United Kingdom. Although not proven to exist in the wilds of Britain, in Wales in particular, the Beast of Bont was said to have haunted the county of Ceredigion throughout the 1980s and 90s, being blamed for the deaths of at least 50 sheep. Located in the same county as the Aeron Valley, a meagre 15 miles as the crow flies from Helena's home, in the spring of 2023 there were fears that the predator, or indeed one of its descendants, had returned. And yet, with no cat captured and bodies still piling, some, including Helena, have started to look elsewhere for explanations. For her, it was no coincidence that sheep, skinned and laid out like rugs, were turning up dead in an area associated with UFO activity. In particular, she thinks that the light orbs that she has seen hold the key to understanding animal mutilations. Fascinatingly, Helena is by no means alone in holding such beliefs. According to Phil Hoyle and his non-profit organisation, the Animal Pathology Field Unit, in recent decades there have been many reports of unusual animal deaths in Wales and the bordering English county of Shropshire, most especially in conjunction with sightings of orbs and spheres of light. After identifying a 50-mile UFO red zone crossing from England into Wales, Hoyle and his team were allegedly able to observe a bright burnt red light hanging over an isolated ravine near a highly forested area known as New Radnor. This was in 2001, at a time when the same area had experienced a high number of sheep deaths, with the bodies that were found having had their flesh carefully stripped away, their brains and other internal organs clinically removed, and their eyes taken. Some of the animals were even found with neat holes on their bodies. During his team's investigation, the red light is said to have disappeared into a valley, reappearing in the blink of an eye elsewhere. Other lights were also observed, with some being said to have changed shape and emit beams of light, morphing and odd, darting, so it was reported, backwards and forwards across the valley floor, as though they were looking for something. The next day, so Hoyle explained in an article, I interviewed farmers in the valley. All but one farm had unusual disappearances of animals or deaths with strange injuries. In many ways, the sheep that have been discovered in the Aeron Valley in recent months can be said to share characteristics with those investigated by Hoyle and his team in the early 2000s. And yet, examining these instances is less than straightforward, especially as there is such a wide range of testimony. Some who have come forward speak of the unnaturally clean and clinical nature of the kills. Others have described in horrific detail how their livestock have been utterly and savagely eviscerated. One speaks of precise, almost medical-like intelligent intervention, the other of a vicious wild predator. Whilst investigating possible extraterrestrial activity in the Aeron Valley and the wider region of West Wales, I was able to obtain footage of one such mutilated lamb. Being much more in line with the clean and clinical than some of the more brutal descriptions, it was discovered in a field at the end of April. Abandoned in the middle of the pasture, with the other sheep and indeed scavengers, including ravens, keeping their distance from it, it can be said to very much match the descriptions provided by researchers like Phil Hoyle. Given its graphic nature, I have decided to blur the footage. For those who are interested, uncensored images will be available on my website. Either way, the lamb appeared drained of blood, with there being no sign of a frenzy either on the ground around it or on its pristine white wool. Its innards were likewise spotless, with all of its organs and genitalia gone. It also appeared to have had its ear removed. Intrigued, I was able to set up a trail camera overlooking the location of the killing. The only predator I was able to film was a fox. Surely this was not our culprit. And so, wanting to understand better what I was looking at, and indeed ascertain whether or not the remains were so unusual that they might be considered extraterrestrial, I contacted Richard Freeman, cryptozoological author and zoological director at the Centre for Fortean Zoology. After sending him the image, he was certain as to the identity of the killer.
The characteristics of a big cat kill, you seem quite convinced that the photo I shared with you is a big cat kill.
It looks like a typical big cat kill to me. I examined one in North Devon a few years ago, and it was a full-grown sheep, not a lamb, and it had had its neck dislocated by being bitten in the neck, which is a typical cat attack. They'll attack by dislocation of the neck bones or suffocation by putting their mouth over the mouth of the prey item, or strangulation by biting the trachea. Then the fleece was sort of peeled away, almost like you would peel the skin of a banana or a kipper. And then the bones picked clean and the internal organs gone, cut totally stripped of meat, very neatly, and the bones weren't crunched up. A dog kill is totally different. Dogs will bite at the flank and the sides of a sheep, hamstringing it, pulling it down, so they'll rip out pieces of the fleece and they'll be all over the place. A big cat has a tongue rather like sandpaper with tiny little spikes on it, and when they lick a bone, they'll rasp the flesh off it. They'll very rarely crunch bones up. So it looked very clean. It looked too clean to be a dog kill.
Because I know people who are more in the animal mutilation from an extraterrestrial side of things would say that because there's no blood and because there's no blood on the ground around it, that means there's something eerie about it. But animals, cats in particular, can do this.
Animals will lick up blood. Us scavengers will clean it up.
Yes, and nature does quite a remarkable job of cleaning everything up then. And it might seem strange to us looking on, but there can be a natural explanation.
Yeah. Well, that lamb to me looked like it was taken by a big cat.
And what do you think about big cats in the UK? Because obviously we're talking about something that we don't expect to see here.
We've had reports of big cats in the UK for years and years and years and years. A lynx was shot in Devon in the early part of the 20th century. We've had a female puma was caught in 1980 by a farmer.
But that's really interesting, and it is almost solving one bizarre element with, in a way, another bizarre element, that there are these cats and there must be a breeding population and they just live there for the most part minding their own business. Now, I know there are some more perhaps wild beliefs that you come across in Fortean circles. For example, that they are big cats, but they're still somehow alien big cats. So a bit of a fun question for you then. What's your opinion on the idea of an alien big cat?
No, I don't think they are. Because they behave like ordinary animals. They kill and eat like ordinary animals. They leave footprints and hair behind them like ordinary animals. They leave scats like ordinary animals.
And so, from a zoological perspective, there is no doubt that the lamb in question was killed by a flesh and blood feline. All of this is not to say that alien animal mutilations aren't happening, only that, on this occasion at least, this isn't it. In the United Kingdom, the official narrative is that there are no big cats in the wild. And yet, as my footage and the testimonies of countless others show, it is no difficult task to prove the inverse. And so, while such does not necessarily help in confirming extraterrestrial activity on Earth, it should tell you that official narratives are not always correct, and that we shouldn't, as a society, be so quick to dismiss the testimonies of people like Helena Worth, simply because our governments tell us that the things that they claim aren't real. Reality is rarely ever so black and white. It is instead a rich mosaic comprising each of our individual shades of grey. And this is what makes Helena's story so intriguing. Not only is she a compelling witness, able to express herself both concisely and in a detail-rich manner, she is also not necessarily saying anything that hasn't already been said. Her shades of grey are similar to those put forward by others. In particular, the suggested link between extraterrestrials and orbs of light can be said to be worthy of further investigation. After all, in addition to Phil Hoyle and the red light orbs he and his team witnessed in the same area and on the same night as multiple livestock disappearances and mutilations in 2001, there are stories from the United States as well. For example, in 1967 in Colorado's San Luis Valley, a horse named Lady was discovered horrifically stripped of flesh after residents reported seeing odd lights moving low and rapidly over the desert. Leading UFO researcher Timothy Good has, in several of his books, highlighted the presence of such light orbs in suspected mutilation cases, with him describing orange, silent, glowing objects on several occasions. Here, it is also worth noting that similar light orbs have been seen over and around crop circles, once more offering the possibility that non-human intelligent light anomalies have the ability to modify physical targets, whether that be sheep, horses, or wheat. And yet, for all of this, the question of motive is still a difficult one to answer.
I wonder why these orbs are doing it. Surely it's either for research. Are they researching the bodies of biological beings that live on Earth? Or are they doing it for their own sustenance? Do they need to be using the flesh to eat? Maybe not, but it's a possibility. Who knows?
The whole UFO thing makes no sense whatsoever when looked at as literal aliens coming to Earth. Why would an intelligent species do that?
Of course, whilst determining motive is undoubtedly important, it also must be said that, given the alien nature of the problem, it may simply be impossible for us to comprehend the actions of an extraterrestrial species, most especially one which may have evolved in a world and under conditions very different from our own. Intelligence, even on Earth, takes many forms, and so who is to say what alien intelligence might look like? In regards to Helena's own experiences within the Aeron Valley, most especially her major encounter with the molten fire orb in 2018, I wanted to know her opinion as to why she seems to have been selected to see all that she has seen.
Because it started dripping this molten lava, and before it went out of view, the top half of it turned red. I'm wondering, why did it do that? Had it seen me? Was it communicating with me? I've no idea. I think round here is a hotspot for orb activity. That is for sure. There's definitely a lot of orb activity around this area in the Aeron Valley. But part of my mind is also wondering, do they know I'm watching? Are they saying hello in their own little way by showing themselves? So I really do wonder, and I'm not really sure. I'd like to think they're communicating with me in some way.
And so, even beyond her personal connection to extraterrestrial happenings, Helena has expressed that she believes the Aeron Valley to be a hotspot. One of the reasons why she believes this is to do with its topography, namely that it is a valley. Certainly, even just now I referenced an infamous animal mutilation case which took place in San Luis Valley. This valley, the same as the Aeron Valley and numerous others around the world, is synonymous with UFO sightings. According to Helena, this may have something to do with extraterrestrials wanting to hide themselves from radar.
As the crow flies south from here, I would guess between 8 and 10 miles, is the Aberporth military airport, and they train military personnel there. So they will have some sort of radar in place there. Their radar surely would come this far, but if these UAPs and Orbs are in the valley, flying along these valleys, they're not going to see them. And so because we live at the bottom of the valley, I believe I'm seeing more orbs because of that.
And so Helena is very much of the opinion that these orbs, whatever they may be, are reluctant to be seen by the military.
In the UK and in the USA and elsewhere, these things have been shot down, and these UAPs know this. They don't want to be seen by military. The military have always had an aggressive reaction to seeing these things. So I don't blame them for hiding.
That Helena mentions Aberporth and the potential danger that the military installation there may pose such extraterrestrial orbs is especially interesting. After all, according to an article published in a 1974 edition of the much-loved UFO journal Flying Saucer Review, radar anomalies were commonplace at the time. Indeed, the article's author, F.W. Holliday, described how he used to know the lieutenant colonel in charge of the Aberporth rocket pads. According to him, puzzling objects had been detected by his radar scanners at various times. On one occasion, so the same article reveals, something akin to a soundless missile was spotted by a separate witness over a populated area within range of the site's radar. Could it be that in the decades since, such UFOs and light anomalies have learnt to avoid detection by the radar and now travel along valleys, such as the one home to the River Aeron? It is an equally peculiar and unsettling thought, most especially as, on my journey from extraterrestrial light orbs to elusive big cats and back again to the orbs, I cannot help but return to Helena's nighttime encounters, both as a child waking up in a different bed and, more recently, seeing the two blue light entities in her home. What was the reason for it? And more importantly, why did these beings, whatever they may be, feel the need to conceal themselves in our valleys? Fear of the military may be one thing, but nighttime violation of our private spaces, our homes, our beds is another. Why are they here? What do they want? These may be questions that we are never able to answer. Thank you so much for watching, and an extra special thank you to everyone who has helped to make this video possible, most especially Helena Worth for very graciously inviting Eric and I to her home. Thank you also to Richard Freeman for taking the time to share his expertise, and finally to our members, both here on YouTube and on Patreon. Your continuing support is always so very much appreciated. And so, I truly hope you enjoyed this documentary special. If you did, please consider liking, subscribing and sharing, all of which help to ensure the future production of videos like this. And if you cannot wait until my next, why not watch the one suggested on screen now? Until next time,